Hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of 18th of September 2023. So आज के important article हिंदू न्यूज़पेपर से न्यू पार्लियामेंट टू होस्ट सेशन फ्रॉम टुमारो निफा केसेस सेंट्रल टीम टू कैरी आउट फील्ड इन्वेस्टिगेशन इन कोझिकोडे टेस्टिंग टाइम्स इंडिया इज एट ए pivotal moment in its healthcare journey sanction for change assessing outcomes of G20 summit export ban and stocking limits are the working project Cheetah year on why is the government pushing for the regulatory mechanism for OTT services, committed to helping artisans, says PM unveils 13,000 crore scheme. Army likely to induct for 114 Dhanush guns by 2026, says officials. UN should prepare for reforms, says S. Jaishankar. Santiniketan finds its place on UNESCO's World Heritage List. Final meet of G20 framework working group from today. Moonquakes testaments to lunar orders is science का पेज है. Then next the new parliament to host a session from tomorrow. The first day of the special session will be held in old buildings with MP moving to the new building. On the second day, many parties demand that the women's reservation bill be cleared. More than 3 months after the new parliament buildings was inaugurated, MPs will move into it on Tuesday, the second day of the special session to be held between September 8 and September 18 and 22. Parliamentary Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi informed floor leaders of parties about the decision at an all-party meeting held by the government on the eve of the session. On the first day, the session will be held in the old Parliament House. The next day, September 19, there will be a photo session which usually is reserved for the end of the Lok Sabha tenure. Then at 11 a.m. there will be a function in the central hall. After that, we will enter the new parliament. The parliament session will start in new parliament on September 19 and regular government work will start there from September 20. Mr. Joshi briefed the media after the 2.5 hour meet. On the first day, both houses will discuss the 75-year journey of Parliament. 51 leaders of 34 parties attended the meetings. The government said 8 bills, 4 already listed, would come up during the session. Sources told the Hindu that the controversial chief election commissioner and other election commissioners appointment, condition of service and team of office bill was unlikely to be taken up. Only 3 days will be reserved for government business about which there is still no clarity. Many parties, even ruling National Democratic Alliance members such as Ajit Pawar led Nationalist Congress Party and the National People's Party, demanded that the women's reservation bill be cleared. It is a shame that women who make up to 50% of the population have such little political representation, said Pinaki Mishra from the Biju Janata Dal. The government faced a volley of question about which is the about why it is maintaining secrecy about the agenda. Several opposition leaders have said it showed the government's lack of confidence in the parliament. Still, no full agenda for the session. There is a sinister line in the parliament bulletin released in September 13 that says that the statement not to be taken an exhaustive. This means the government can bring more bills, and even today they did not clarify what to expect. Trinamool Congress Rajya Sabha floor leader Derek O'Brien said late invitees. Many leaders also expressed disappointment at the late invitees for the flag hosting function at the new parliament. It is learned that Tiruchi Siva of the Dravida Munetra Kajagram tour of the invited the meeting, protesting against the fact that the invitees were only in Hindi. He also complained that most of the MPs received their invite for Sunday's function only late on Friday evening. The Communist Party of India Marxist member also complained that the government had made no arrangements for opposition leaders' participation at the event since chairs were reserved only for ministers. At the beginning of the meeting, National Congress leader Farooq Abdullah suggested that MPs pay tribute to the three officers who have who have been killed in an ongoing encounter with militants in Anantnag in southern Kashmir. A minute of silence was observed at the end of the meeting for the slain officers. The all-party meeting was briefly caught up in the Andhra Pradesh political maelstrom with a bitter exchange between Telugu Desam Party (TDP) MPs Ram Mohan Naidu and Joydev Gala and the YSR Congress leader Vijay Sai Reddy. It began with the Mr. Naidu's remark that Prime Minister Narendra Modi had spoken in 2014 of fast-tracking criminal cases against legislature, but nothing had happened on that front. The Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister Mr. Naidu said had 11 CBI cases, 7 ED cases, and 11 other cases, and still he continued in chair. What finally provoked Mr. Reddy was Mr. Naidu's comment that tomorrow even Lalit Modi could aspire to be the chief minister. Pandemonium broke out with the TDP and YSR Congress MPs trading allegations. Mr. Naidu also flagged the recent arrest of TDP President N. Chandrababu Naidu by the state police. NIPA cases central team to carry out field investigation in Kozhikode. A four-member central team from the Department of Animal Husbandry and Dairying DAHD, Government of India will carry out field investigation in Kozhikode district from Monday to Wednesday in view of Nipah virus outbreak that claimed two lives. The team, which is expected to arrive on Sunday night, consists of HR Khanna, Joint Commissioner and National Livestock Mission, Vijay Kumar Teotia, Joint Commissioner Livestock Health, and one expert is from the ICAR National Institute of High Security Disease, Bhopal, and the Regional Disease and Diagnostic Laboratory, Bangalore. Nipah is a zoonotic disease affecting both human and animals. The DAHD has directed teams to submit daily reports and advise the Animal Husbandry Department on measures for disease prevention. The central team will be joined by a team from the State Institute for Animal Disease, Pellod. Last week, the State Animal Husbandry Department had stepped up surveillance in the livestock sector in view of these cases. The department had also issued a set of guidelines for farmers and the public in pigs. For instance, the disease affects the respiratory system and mm, nervous system. Steps were taken to identify pig farms near the epicenter of the outbreak and put them under surveillance for symptoms. Testing times, editorial person testing time August foreign trade numbers are worrisome yet hold some hopes. India's goods exports shrank for the seventh consecutive times and the ninth time in 11 months in this August, while imports surged to hit the highest level since March this year at $58.6 billion. Inbound shipments were still 5.2% below last August levels, but exports fell by a relatively steeper 6.9%, leading to $24.2 billion trade deficit, the widest since October 2022. Goods exports are now down 11.9% so far this year, and imports have dropped 12.1%. Services exports for last month will be known later, but Commerce Ministry extrapolations suggest that this engine that has been resilient so far through the global economic turmoil is also beginning to feel the heat. For now, the 0.4% drop expected in the service exports in August is minor, and with the tangible imports also likely dropping at a sharper pace, this will not exacerbate the trade balance yet. However, sinking services exports imply that their ability to bridge the goods trade deficit that were up sharply last year will be restricted, thus raising the possibility of wider current account deficit from this quarter. With global commodity prices rising around 12% from June levels to hit a 15-month high this month, the pressure on the goods trade deficit is likely to escalate, especially as oil and gems and jewelry import have fallen less than their exports so far in 2023-24. In the first 4 months of this fiscal, about half the decline is outgoing shipment has been fueled by petroleum despite volumes rising 6% as price fell 27%. This may change if global oil prices, which crossed $90 per barrel over the past few weeks for the first time since November 2022, stay elevated. Export volumes of as many as 13 major items rose between April and July, but their value had declined owing to lower prices. That is a good omen about demand for Indian good, and amid gloom and the government believe rising commodity prices will help the trade lines, but they could also be a double-edged sword for India as its strategic gambit to import more Russian oil has turned less lucrative. Moreover, sticky inflation could further dampen demand, especially in key markets such as the European Union, which just hiked interest rate to a record high. Inflation visited in United States last month, but not enough yet to dent a festive demand that may lift order books in coming months. That engineering goods, which account for a quarter of the India's export, clocked their first uptick after 8 months in August, with half of the key 14 key segment of export growing. The best performance in 9 months is a welcome sign. India needs to do all it can to nurture precious green shoots and support exporters. Then India is at a pivotal moment in its healthcare journey. In the last few years, India has steadily become a strong voice for the various critical issues, whether it is climate change, electrifications, new age manufacturing, or space race. India is at the forefront and even leading the change. This has never been more apparent recently when India became the first country to successfully land a mission near the south pole of the moon and concluded a very successful G20 presidency, fostering global alignment on a range of key issues. And NCD free India to avoid an age tax. It is heartening to witness a new India emerging, an India that is ambitious, and India that believes in its destiny to be the global leader, and India that is guided by the heritage of an ancient civilization but fueled by the energy, passion, and ambition on its youth. However, this is also the same India that is now the world's diabetics capital. Also, millions have hypertension, and its youth are succumbing to heart, heart attacks, cancer, respiratory issues, depression, and more. If left unchecked, India's non-communicable diseases burden will be nearly $4 trillion by 2030. This is one of the biggest roadblock to India's development and will create an age tax on India's demographic dividend. We must act together and with urgency to prevent this, or else India decade could turn into a generation of lost opportunity. I urge the healthcare industry to join hands and protect India from this menace by increasing awareness, advocating better lifestyle choices, and enabling comprehensive health checks that include proper scan instead of having just a blood test that are simply inadequate to test for many early signs of disease. The country has come a long way from 1983 when we started Apollo and has made a tremendous progress on key health metrics. Infant mortality has improved by 4 times, maternal mortality has improved by 7 times, and the average life expectancy of an Indian is up to of nearly 30% from 55 years to over 70 now. In fact, today India has world class healthcare infrastructure along with incredible clinical talent that delivers the best in the class clinical outcomes at incredible scale and a fraction of a global price. India's expertise in highly specialized areas such as transplant cardiology or oncology and more has made on the country a fast growing destination for medical value travel. MVT not just for the price but also for the speed of access and the sheer quality of care as a medical hub. Potential in AI solution, India has emerged as a global MVT hub, particularly in the fields of oncology, orthopedics, and robotic surgery. A significant milestone in this journey is the introduction of a proton beam therapy technology, making India a regional leader in cancer treatment. Proton beam therapy technology. Patients from across the globe are drawn to India for its world-class medical expertise, state-of-art infrastructure, and cost-effective cares. Orthopedic procedures, including joint replacement and spinal surgery, are conducted by highly skilled surgeons using minimally invasive technique. This attracts patients seeking top-notch orthopedic care at the competitive prices. Robotic surgery has also gained a popularity with India's hospitals adopting robotic assisted techniques for precision and faster recovery. The country's expertise in this area draws international patients seeking minimally invasive, high precision surgical interventions. MBT is gaining strategic importance given its ability to create employment as well as earn foreign exchange. While India is already one of the leading destinations for patients seeking care abroad, there is adequate headroom for growth. Moreover, fostering global collaboration between the public and private sectors is crucial for realizing this vision. Public-private partnership can help create a conducive environment for MBT by jointly investing in infrastructure, promoting medical tourism, and setting up international healthcare accreditation bodies. Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming healthcare worldwide, and India has the potential to be at the forefront of this revolution. The country possesses a vast pool of talented data scientists, engineers, and healthcare professionals who can drive innovations in AI-driven healthcare solutions. One of the key areas where AI can make a significant impact is in diagnostics. AI-powered tools can enhance the accuracy and efficiency of medical diagnosis, leading to faster treatment decisions and better patient outcomes. Additionally, AI can help predict disease outbreaks, analyze healthcare data, and optimize treatment plans, expediting healthcare procedure and revolutionizing drug discovery, ultimately making healthcare more personalized and effective. India has already made strides in AI application for healthcare, but it must continue to invest in research and development, foster collaboration between academia and industry, and create an ecosystem that encourages innovations. Doing so can position India as a global leader in AI-driven healthcare solutions, exporting its expertise to benefit healthcare systems worldwide. AI expenditure in India is expected to reach $11.78 billion by 2025. It is expected to add $1 trillion to India's economy by 2035. India stands at a pivotal moment in its healthcare journey by reimagining its healthcare model. The country can position itself as the global destination for medical value travel, a powerhouse of AI-driven healthcare solutions, and a leader in combating NCDs. To achieve this vision, India must prioritize community health first, foster public-private partnership and invest in innovation and research with concerted efforts and a commitment to excellence. A healthier and more prosperous India can be built for generations to come. Next is sanctions for change. A year after the death of Mahsa Amini, the 22-year-old Kurdish woman who was arrested by Iran's morality police for allegedly floating the country's mandatory hijab rule, anti-government protests seem to have lost their momentum, but the theocratic regime remains vulnerable to more such shocks. The Islamic Republic, which is struggling with economic woes due to crippling American sanctions, has witnessed a wave of protest with a demand for reforms and at the times regime change. The protest triggered by the custodial death of Amini had rattled the regime initially, which had sent mixed signals on disbanding the infamous morality police force and altering the hijab laws, but it later recovered from the setback and tightened the crackdown on the protest. According to the rights organization, more than 500 people, including 71 minors, have been killed in the unrest and hundreds wounded and arrested in the past years. Iran has also executed at least 7 people linked to the protest. On the first anniversary of Amini's death, there were reports of security personnel detaining activists to prevent any kind of a memorial events for the woman whose name has emerged as a rallying cry for reforms and women's freedoms in a country that has been tightly held by the Shia mullahs since 1979 revolution. The Biden administration of United States has imposed a new set of sanctions on the first anniversary of the Amini's death, targeting officials in Iran's security apparatus. President Joe Biden and other officials have repeatedly called out the rights of violations, but the US policy towards Iran has its own problems. First, while the sanctions have hit the Iranian economy hard, infl- inflaming resentment, they have done little in changing the behavior of the regime. Second, when it comes to protecting its interests, Washington has chosen to engage with mullahs irrespective of its rhetoric over human rights. The US and Iran are in an advanced stage of finalizing a prisoner swap deal, as part of which the US would agree to transfer some $6 billion Iranian funds frozen in South Korean accounts to Qatar, which Tehran can tap for humanitarian purposes instead of this of and on hostility and engagement, which is not helping the Iranian people. The West should adopt a more consistent policy of engagement and pressure to extract compromises compromises from Iran in return for economic rewards for the mullahs. The recurring protest should serve as a reminder that a large section of population has already turned hostile towards their regime. The protester may not have attend a critical mass for now, but it may not remain so far in a country which a history of radical revolution if the underlying problems of economic crisis, regime rigidity and a lack of reforms are not addressed. Then assessing outcomes of G20 summit. The 18th G20 summit produced the New Delhi leaders declaration. In the days building of the summit, there were anxiety about the chances of its success. It hinged on the question of whether the summit would end in a consensus-based full-spectrum declaration or in a chair's summary with its portions marked to show a split among the members. Yet by the afternoon of day one, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that Complete consensus was reached on the declaration contents. This, together with the inclusion of African Union in the G20 as a member, turned concerns into joyous celebration. Now it is time to evaluate the declaration and assess its value on the threefold yardstick of consensus. Additionality and implementability. CAI. The attempt is to dissect only the more important elements of the text. Driving philosophy. Six paragraphs of the preamble and the last paragraph of the conclusion reveal the goals and driving motivations of G20 leaders. We are one earth, one family, and we share one future. They noted the notion of unity and a shared destiny will aptly stressed to the gravity of the multiple challenges facing humankind today. The way out for the world is to be driven by the philosophy of living in harmony with our surrounding ecosystem. They worked on harmonizing development with the environment, stating that no country should have to choose between the fighting poverty and fighting for our planet. Paragraph 5 lists 12 goals to which the members are fully committed. These range from securing inclusive growth and accelerating full implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda to addressing debt vulnerability, reforms of multilateral development banks, and integrating the preservatives of the Global South into the future G20 agenda. The document's last paragraph reiterates the determination to steer the world out of its current challenges and build a bright future. That this will be a long term project was evident. Eight paragraphs were devoted to defining the grouping's view of what the proceeding ministerial meetings had called geopolitical issue. A fine balance was struck A fine balance was struck between the Russian red lines and the insistence by G7 on ensuring respect for traditional territorial integrity and sovereignty or political independence. This middle path crafted by the Indian negotiators will, with the valuable help from other countries' diplomats, was seen as the only way to save the summit. The general verdict was that Russia gained a little more while the G7 lost a little to prevent the summit's failure. The leaders agreed to call for a comprehensive, just and durable peace in Ukraine. Whether their labor will have any serious effect on the two warring sides and their backers remain doubtful. The first ever expansion of G20 membership was imbued with the most significance. The document it depicts the AU as a permanent member, even though G20 does not have permanent and non-permanent members, it has only members and guests. The admission was agreed in the name of creating a more inclusive world. The leaders' commitment on what follows will be watched with real interest. They observed, "We commit to strengthen our ties with and support the African Union, realize the aspiration under Agenda 2030 2063." To begin with, G20 may have to offer ample assistance to facilitate AU participation in G20 activities at the level of governments and miscellaneous engagement groups. G20's central agenda relating to economic and financial sector, climate action and energy transition, implementation of SDGs, technological transformation through digital public infrastructure, reforms of international financial institution, trade and taxation, and securing gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls is wide-ranging, ambitious, and even aspirational. Relevant domain experts are in a better position to access the prospects of this agenda's implementability. A question that is often asked is where will additional financial resources come for achieving all these goals. John Kirton, Director G20 Research Group at the University of Toronto noted there was a little new money mobilized for debt relief for developing countries for reform of MDBs and the International Monetary Fund for the global health and or for food security, education and other social needs. Reinvigorating multilateralism. Paragraph 47 propounds the view that global challenges of 21st century can only be addressed through reinvigorated multilateralism, reforms, and international cooperation. It wants the United Nations institution to be more responsive to the entire membership, the need to make the global governance more representative, effective, transparent, and accountable has been stated clearly. The fact that these formations have the support of the entire G20 leadership creates a glimmer of hope of some progress in the future, even though realism demands that the proponent of reforms to remain cautious on the CAI yardstick. It is obvious that the declaration is not only backed by the 100% consensus, but it also breaks new grounds and requires progress in terms of concept, goals, and objectives as compared to the Bali declaration. The key criterion for the success of the summit is the degree of implementation of its decision, but this will be accorded an answer only in the medium term. Meanwhile, there should be no hesitation in recognizing that the summit has been a major political and diplomatic success for G20 and its current president, India. Then export bans and stocking limits, are they working? A policy brief issued by the Indian Council for Research on International Economic Relations said that the recent step taken by the government to curb inflation, such as wheat and rice export ban and increasing export duties, were knee-jerk approaches rather than a well thought out strategy. It argued for a rational trade policy to contain food inflation, which takes into account both consumer and producer. In August 2023, retail inflation accelerated to 6.83, which is higher than the ceiling of 6%, as food and beverages carries 57% weightage. In India's retail inflation calculation, and food inflation was 9.94%. Rapid acceleration in that segment has severe impact on the retail inflation. The date the Indian government has implemented a series of actions aimed at controlling food inflation, such as prohibiting the export of wheat in May 2022 and halting the export of broken rice in September 2022. Additionally, in June 2023, the government imposed stocking limits on wheat traders and millers. In July 2023, an export ban was placed on non-basmati white rice, followed by a 20% export duty on parboiled rice in August 23. A minimum export price of $1,200 per ton was set for basmati rice, along with a 40% export duty on onions. That too shows the chronology of trade and domestic stock policy measures to tame inflation of rice and wheat due to heat waves. The production of wheat has suffered in the last 2 years, while wheat procurement by the government has also been low in the last two cycles. Wheat inflation was 9.22% in August. All this prompted the government to ban wheat exports in May 2022, argues the brief, but this sudden ban on wheat exports, instead of bringing wheat inflation down, led to greater uncertainty in the market, and wheat inflation surged to 15.7% in August 2022. The government of India has also banned exports of wheat flour products, says the policy brief. Just before the harvest season, wheat inflation accelerated to 25.4% in February 2023. Following this, the government of loaded wheat under the open market sale schemes is at much cheaper prices and announced wheat stocking limits, says the policy brief. While these measures did bring down inflation, the report argues that the implications of such measures on farmers who bore the brunt have to be taken into account. Chat 3 shows trends in cereal exports in India. Data from the report shows that non-basmati exports increased from 1.38 mmT in financial year 20 to 6.40 mmT in financial year 23 by 363%. The report argues that in fiscal year 2023, the per ton export value for the non-basmati rice stood at $344, falling below India's minimum support price (MSP) for rice. This indicates that millers may be sourcing rice directly from the farmers of that, or that there could be an increase in rice supply due to potential distribution leakage from the expanded PMGKAY free rice programs. Chart 4 shows the offtake of the rice and wheat under the National Food Security Act and PMGKY from the central poll. Chart 3 and 4 underscore the growth in rice and wheat offtake within the last 3 years, as well as the significant rise in grain exports from India over the same time period. In July 2023, the rice inflation was 13%. The government banned the export of non-basmati rice, yet inflation remained at 12%, 12.5%. Rather than imposing export duty and gradually increasing its impact, the government called for a ban, which created panic among the African and Indian diaspora in USA, says report. Project Cheetah, a year on. The first batch of 8 cheetahs from Namibia arrived on September 17, 2022. Officially launched Project Cheetah, India's Cheetah introduced program. An overview of the project as it completes 1 year. Why have African cheetahs been introduced in India? The goal of introduction of African cheetahs is to establish viable cheetah meta population in India that allows the cheetah to perform its function role as a top predator and provides space for the expansion of the cheetah within its historical range, by thereby contributing to its global conservation efforts. This effectively means that the project aims to enable cheetah to establish themselves as viable and free-ranging population in large unfenced wildlife reserves, which are in turn connected by wildlife corridors to other unfenced reserves. What is the status of the project? In total, 20 adult African cheetahs have been imported so far. The first batch of 8 cheetah The first batch of 8 cheetahs arrived on September 17, 2022, and another batch of 12 cheetah from South Africa arrived on February 18, 2023. In late March 23, one of the female gave birth to a little litter of 4 calves which were conceived in India. After prolonged period of quarantine, which ranged from 50 to 70, more than 70 days, the prescribed period of quarantine in 30 days, the cheetahs were released from their quarantine enclosure into larger holding enclosures so that they could acclimatize themselves to the local habitat and environmental conditions. This plan was fast release male coalitions. After about 1 to 2 months of them getting acclimatized in the larger enclosure, this was to be followed by the release of females 4 weeks after the release of the males. The release of cheetah to run free in the wild was delayed with the first cheetah being released after more than Only 12 of the 20 cheetahs were ever released into the wild, with a few being brought back multiple times to Kuno National Park since the managers felt that the cats were moving into areas that may have posed a risk for their survival. Six of the cheetahs which came from Africa have died, four while still in captivity and two in the wild. Four of the adult cheetahs are yet to be released to run free even for a single day. Additionally, three of the four corpses have died, and the only remaining corpse is being hand reared as its mother has rejected it since the death of the three cheetahs in July August. All 10 of the remaining three cheetahs have been captured and kept captive in enclosures for observation, removal of radio collars and treatments safely capturing these cheetahs, especially a female whose radio collar was functioning only intermittently is no small feat, and the efforts, skills, determination and dedication displayed by the field teams has to be appreciated. Currently, from the available information on the first anniversary of the project, all the surviving 14 adult cheetahs and one cub are in captivity, and there is talk of them being radio collared again and released once the winter sets in. The project authorities are taking off the additional sites being prepared for releasing the cheetahs, such as the Gandhisagar Wildlife Sanctuary and Naura Dehi Wildlife Sanctuary, both in Madhya Pradesh. Gandhisagar is expected to be ready by the end of this year, while Naura Dehi is likely to be ready by sometimes 24. The project authorities are also taking of improving more cheetahs from Africa sometime next year. Why did the cheetah die? There have been a variety of reasons and are causes attributed to the death of six adults and three cubs. Radio collars are not on the underlying reason for the deaths of any of these cats. At least that is the official stated positions. One needs to determine if the African cheetahs are susceptible to certain insects and parasites in India, and if the collars provide a microenvironment conducive for these to thrive. The first cheetah which died is said to have perished due to a renal condition. The question that arises is why the government of India agreed to bring a cheetah which was sick and put it through more stress by transporting it and having it adapt to a new environment. One of the female died when the authorities attempted to get the cheetah to make inside the enclosure. Three of the four cows born in India are reported to have died due to heat wave conditions. This raises more questions. If they were born in March 2023, that means the mating took place in India in captivity. Why then was there a rush to mate the cheetah in captivity, when it could occur naturally in a free-ranging environment after they are released as prescribed in the action plan? One of the males is reported to have died due to a cardiopulmonary failure but what caused it, the ultimate cause has still not been determined. The last three deaths occurring during the monsoon, while there have been several conflicting reports regarding the cause of their deaths, no definitive cause has been shared in the public domain. Even though the cheetah were under constant monitoring, 9 deaths have occurred. It is the time the authorities releases the approach and act decisively so that one can prevent such deaths, especially when the animals are in captivity. We also have to be cognizant of the effect of long period of captivity and on the fitness of these cats to be released to run free in the wild. Why is the government pushing for the regulatory mechanism for the OTT services? ये थोड़ा आप चेक कर लीजिएगा। देन नेक्स्ट जो है, committed to helping artisans says PM unveils 13,000 crore scheme. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Sunday said his government was committed to uplift the artisans and craft people, and that the 13,000 crore Pradhan Mantri Vishwakarma Yojana launched on Sunday would equip crafts people with the technology to augment their skills for modern market. Mr. Modi also inaugurated the first phase of the 5,400 crore state of the art India International Convention and Expo Center named Yaso Yashobhumi at Dwarika in New Delhi. Today I dedicate Yashobhumi to every labor, every Vishwakarma of the nations. Mr. Modi said, "We are living at a time when there is such a government in the country that provides recognition and help to marginalized people." He added, Mr. Modi also unveiled 18 customized stamp sheets showcasing the 18 traditional trades covered by the scheme, along with the toolkit e-booklet in the occasion. The scheme, the Vishwakarma scheme aims to enhance the accessibility and quality of products and services offered by traditional artisans and craftsmen. The scheme offers collateral fee enterprise and development loans of 1 lakh first tranche to be repaid in 18 months and 2 lakh second tranche to be paid in 30 months, and a concessional rate of interest of 5% will be charged from the beneficiary, with the interest subvention cap of 8% to be paid by the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises. The credit guarantee fees will be borne by the union government, stressing the government's vision for vocal for local. Mr. Modi also asked people to purchase local products for the forthcoming festivals, including Ganesh Chaturthi, Dhanteras, and Deepavali. Speaking of Yashobhumi, Mr. Modi said the conference tourism sector estimated at 25 lakh crore presented a huge opportunity for India. MICE facility with a total project area of over 8.9 lakh square meters and built of area of more than 1.8 lakh square meters. Yashobhumi will find its place among the world's largest MIC meeting, incentives, conference and exhibitions facilities, he said. Through the Yashobhumi Convention Center alone, lakhs of youth are expected to secure employment opportunity, he said. Yashobhumi will also be connected to the Delhi Airport Metro Express lines with the inauguration of new metro stations, the Yashobhumi Dwarka Sector 25. Before the inauguration, Mr. Modi took a metro ride from the Daula Khan station to the newly built station. During the ride, many passengers interacted with the Prime Minister and snapped selfies with him. Army likely to induct 114 Dhanush guns by 2026, says official. The next जो है, United Nations should be prepared for reform, says S. Jaishankar. The army, which has ordered 114 Dhanush artillery guns and has one regiment operational already, is expecting to receive all the guns by 2026, according to the defense sources, with the focus on long range and augmented firepower. The army is also looking at vastly increasing the range of Pinaka multi-rocket launch system MRLS, and Defense Research and Development Organization DRDO is working on it. The Prolaya surface-to-surface passive ballistic missiles two is in advanced stage of induction. Sources said one regiment that was equipped with the Dhanush was operationalized only last year. There has been slight delay due to some imported components, among others. All that has stabilized by 2026. The army should be getting balanced regiment. A defense source said Dhanush is a 155 mm 45 calibre Taud artillery gun with a range of 36 km and it has demonstrated a range of 35 km with specialized ammunition. It is an upgrade of existing 155 mm and 39 caliber Bofors FA-77 guns. The advanced weapons and equipment India Limited carved after the corporate corporations of the Ordnance Factory Board that is now manufacturing the Dhanush guns has a team on site and is working with the army sources stated. The army currently has 4 Pinaka regiment and 6 more on order. In addition to adding numbers, the army is keen on extending its range as well as the configurations available. As reported by the Hindu earlier, the range of original Pinaka rocket was 37 km, which was enhanced to 45 km with the upgraded MK1, while the guided Pinaka has a range of 75 km, which the Defense Acquisition Council has already cleared for procurement. A Pinaka air denial munition rocket system has also been developed. Pinaka with a range of 120 km is under development, DRDO official had stated earlier. Then next जो है United Nations should be prepared for reform, says S. Jaishankar, presenting a strong case for permanent seat for India in United Nations Security Council. External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar said on Sunday that the United Nations should be prepared for reform in this regard. What would happen if they do not reform? People will find solution outside, and this is a message the United Nations has to understand, Mr. Jaishankar said in an interaction at the Indian Institute of Space Science and Technology here on the topic G20 and Vikasit Bharat resistant, resistant to reform will eventually it it's a bid like survival of the fittest become anachronistic and therefore develop the danger of heading towards a not extinction but a little bit of irrelevance. He added, Mr. Jaishankar said that of 54 countries in Africa, none is a member. Similarly, in case with the Latin America countries, the most populous country in the world is not there. Mr. Jaishankar said the real achievement of the New Delhi G20 summit was to get the top 20 countries of the world once again thinking about the right issues. The mission of G20 was how to nurture and take forward global growth and global development. The key outcomes of the summit, he said, was acceptance by the top 20 nations that the other 125 to 130 countries were no longer able to meet their social targets. Then Shantiniketan finds its place on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Shantiniketan, a town established by the Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore, made it to the UNESCO's World Heritage List on Sunday. Located in West Bengal's Birbhum district, Shantiniketan, which means abode of peace, started taking shape in 1901 and is the place where Tagore laid the foundation of the Vishwa Bharati University. New inscription on the United UNESCO World Heritage List. Shantiniketan, India. Congratulations, the world body said. Shantiniketan become India's 41st World Heritage Site to join UNESCO's list. When West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee expressing happiness over the inclusion and said that Shantiniketan was nurtured by the poet and has been supported by people of Bengal over the generation. We from the government of West Bengal have significantly added to its infrastructure in the last 12 years, and the world now recognizes the glory of the heritage place. Kudos to all who love Bengal. Tagore and his message of fraternity. Jai Bengal, Pranam to Gurudev, Mrs. Banerjee said on the social media platform X. The dossier by the culture minister proposing Santiniketan's inclusion on UNESCO's World Heritage List points out that the place exhibits an important interchange in human values over a span of time or within a cultural area of world on development in the architecture of technology monumental art town planning and landscape design attempts to get Santiniketan inscribed on the World Heritage List have been going on since 2010. Working on the latest proposal for nomination of Santiniketan as UNESCO World Heritage Site began in the financial year 2020 and 2021, said Subha Majumdar, Superintendent Archaeological Survey of India, who worked on the restoration of several structures of Santiniketan over the past few years. Of ASI has been restoring several structures in the neighborhood. Then final meet of G20 framework working group from today. The fourth and final meeting of the G20 Framework Working Group under India's G20 presidency will be held in the Chhattisgarh capital Raipur from Monday. An official said on Sunday. More than 65 delegates from G20 members and invited countries and various international regional organizations will participate in the two-day meeting at Mayfair Resort in Nava Raipur. The official said. Chandni Raina, advisor to the Union Finance Ministry, and Sam Beckett, chief economic advisor, His Majesty's Treasury, the UK will chair the meeting. The official said the FWG facilitates discussion on the latest global economic outlook and policy guidance on the key macroeconomic issues. He said the deliverable from these working groups under the 2023 Indian presidency have been successfully concluded, and they are referred to in the New Delhi leaders declarations. The G20 report on macroeconomic impacts of food and energy security and G20 report on macroeconomic risk stemming from climate change and transition pathways. He said the upcoming meetings will take stock of the discussion in the FWG in 2023 and explore future areas of work. The official said on the sidelines, the RBI will host a series of Jan Bhagidari events, including panel discussion on digital banking and financial inclusion, financial literacy programs, a G20 awareness program, a painting contest, and a slogan writing contest. He said the delegates will also be hosted for Ratri Bhoj for some Sambad conversation over dinner and a cultural event which will enable them to enjoy the unique cushion and cultural richness of Chhattisgarh. The official added. Chhattisgarh Chief Minister Bhupesh Baghel said he would attend the G20 FWG program on Monday. Then आज का लास्ट आर्टिकल है Moonquakes testament to lunar ordeal. An earthquake is called when tectonic plates shift, but quakes themselves are not restricted to Earth. For example, small tremors have also been detected on the moon. They are not handiwork of tectonic plates. However, instead, the moon is practically groaning from extreme temperature. A difference from 121 degrees to 133 degrees Celsius. A breathtaking a breathtaking range of 250 degrees Celsius. The resulting strain leads to seismic activity called moonquakes. They can also occur due to meteors striking the lunar surface. Indeed, the surface is pockmarked with thousands of craters, not surprising because the moon's lack of an atmosphere allows even small impact to be powerful enough to deform the ground. A study published earlier this month unearthed yet another cause. Researchers found that the Apollo 17 lunar lander module launched in 1972 may also have triggered some tremors. Scientists reanalyzed the data collected by its instruments using artificial intelligence. They found that the lander itself set off very feebly seismic movement on the moon as it is adjusted to the natural satellite's drastic temperature changes as countries around the world including India plan to establish outposts on the lunar surface. Studying the moonquakes and their causes is crucial. If nothing else, it will help us to build structure on the moon that do not topple if a lander descend nearby. So this is all for today, and we'll meet from tomorrow onwards with new Delhi news analysis from the Hindu newspaper. So thank you all. Thanks a lot.